You can create something within the brain without necessarily creating it in reality. I'll give you an example of that, by the way. That yellow is totally an optical illusion. This is an RGB pixelated screen. There aren't any yellow indicators, they're all red, green, and blue. Did you know this, by the way? LCD screens, RGB screens, are species specific. They're designed to work with humans. If you're a bird looking at that, you'd think it was a shit representation of reality. Humans just have red, green, and blue cones that detect color, and the screen, unlike birds which have ultraviolet detection, but they don't detect red. I mean, there's some things like shrimp which can detect 16 types of wavelength. If you produced a screen for a shrimp, it would be a really complicated thing to do. This is a hack. There's no yellow. All it does is mix red and green in a mixture which your brain associates with the color yellow, and the color yellow is not created there remotely on the screen. It's created entirely in your head. Our contention is you can create value, you can create great experiences in the head without doing much to reality, what we call innovation. Now, innovation is spelled I-N-N-E-R-vation. It's a close relative of innovation, but it works slightly differently. Innovation is where you innovate not by doing something new in the physical world, but by doing something differently within the brain. Now, one of the things that drives me nuts when I go to digital conferences is there's always someone there with a really, really sophisticated technological solution. And there's always a guy who has this really clever beacon solution which detects when you have a past customer walking within 100 yards of the shop. And you go, this is really interesting, I'm intrigued by this, contextual communication is useful. And they always say, so the great thing is, you can serve them a 20% off offer. I kind of go, look, I don't need a PhD to help me sell things by dropping the price, okay? If you want to find someone who can sell things by dropping the price, just go to a car boot sale, don't go to Harvard, right? Any fucking idiot can sell things by dropping the price. The art of marketing is surely to charge more for the same thing by making it seem better. Now, the vital thing here is to realize that you can do this. You can synthesize, just as you can synthesize yellow in the human head, you can synthesize value in the human brain. And the best example of this, my favorite ad of the last 3 years, was an announcement by an EasyJet pilot. Coming to land, you know that feeling where your plane draws up about a mile from the terminal and you hear the engines wind down and everybody on the plane thinks to themselves silently, oh shit, it's going to be a bus. You know that feeling, right? You kind of paid for the flight and you're just expecting to taxi to the bloody terminal, and then the plane stops a mile away and everybody goes, oh shit, it's a bus. And I was experiencing exactly that same emotion. But the pilot was a basic genius. He gave an example of a piece of fantastic innovation. Because this is what he said. He said, I've got some bad news and some good news. By the way, this is always a very good way of creating innovation. If you look at a lot of great advertising end lines, good things come to those who wait, you either love it or you hate it, reassuringly expensive, naughty but nice. A lot of great advertising end lines, we're number 2 so we try harder, have that yes but in them. It's a very clever trick because what the human does when you're presented with bad news and good news is to minimize regret, you disproportionately focus on the good news to cheer yourself up. Really, really worthwhile. I've actually gone to the government with this and said, look, part of the problem of a lot of things government does, tax, for example, is there's no upside. If you created a tiny upside to tax, like you got a badge, okay? My own suggestion that higher rate taxpayers should be allowed to drive in the bus lanes was rejected, but there we go. I'll try again. If there were a tiny upside, we can make ourselves much happier. Things like speeding tickets and tax make us disproportionately angry. There are people who've gone to jail for 5 years who can tell a positive story about it. It was a formative experience. I met a lot of interesting people I never would have met, okay? There are a lot of appalling experiences where you can tell the upside story. But with something like tax, nobody provides the upside story. The pilot did. He said, I've got some bad news and some good news. He said, the bad news is that we haven't been able to get an air bridge because there's a plane blocking the gate. But the good news is the bus will take you right next to passport control, so you won't have far to walk to collect your bags. And a couple of us looked at each other and went, shit, that's always true, isn't it? When you have a bus, it takes you right next to passport control. You don't have to walk, 400 yards through a kind of crap version of blue water before you can get to passport control. The bus takes you right next to passport. Well, actually, I've got quite a heavy bag. I'm glad there's a bus. And just by changing what people focus on, you can make something that people thought was shit seem good. Shakespeare said the same thing. There's no such thing as good or bad, but only thinking makes it so. Shakespeare spotted that. You could argue there are loads and loads of... fantastically, by the way, you can make people pay for things which are a downside. If you buy a Ferrari, they'll deliver it for free to your local Ferrari dealership, apparently. Or you can pay £500, have a tour of the factory in Maranello, which you travel to at your own expense, and then drive the car home. I don't know if you noticed that, but by framing it as a tour of the factory, they've got you to pay to collect your own car. Now, things aren't cheap. I mentioned that thing about we'll give them a 20% discount. You can make things cheaper through innovation. Who's got an espresso machine? I've got one, love it like a child. It is, in fact, insanely expensive. If you had to buy an espresso coffee in a jar, like Nescafe, for an equivalent dosage of caffeine, would cost about 70 quid. And you'd look at it next to the Nescafe and go, this is completely bonkers. The fascinating thing is, you couldn't buy it. If you looked at a jar of coffee costing 70 quid, you couldn't buy it. You go, this is just insane. But it doesn't come in a jar, it comes in a pod, which gives you an individual dose of espresso coffee. So your frame of reference isn't Nescafe, it's Starbucks. And you put the 29p pod into your Nespresso machine, and you think, well, it's 29p, that would cost me £2.20 at Starbucks. This machine's practically making me money. Rolls-Royce and Maserati made their cars cheaper through innovation. They stopped exhibiting them at car shows, where they look expensive, and they started exhibiting them at yacht and plane shows. If you've been looking at Learjets, Gulfstreams and Sunseekers all afternoon, a €250,000 car is an impulse buy. By the way, if you allow people to pay for something contactlessly, it feels 15% cheaper. So innovation is a really important thing. I would argue that Uber is very largely an innovation. Regardless of what people talk about it as disruption, economic model, blah, 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 blah. The reason it disrupted was not because it got you a car quicker, but because of a very simple thing. Just as the human brain you don't produce yellow, but you can generate yellow. You can reduce wait time, not by reducing it, but by reducing the uncertainty of it. The thing that was appalling about minicabs, apart from the fact they always lied about how long they were going to take, this is a very simple thing. The single thing the London Transport did that most improved passenger satisfaction per pound spent wasn't faster, more frequent trains, it was dot matrix displays on the platform. We're happier waiting 9 minutes for a train knowing that it's going to take 9 minutes than waiting 5 minutes for a train in a state of uncertainty. We really, really hate uncertainty. When you look at queuing, there are about 9 psychological factors that affect people's experience of a queue, which are not the duration they have to wait. Worst thing you can do is have a queue alongside your queue, which is moving faster than yours is, okay? Anybody stuck in traffic knows the same phenomenon. What Uber did is it allowed you to basically order a car, and then you could tell yourself a story. You go, oh, look. Now, whereas with a minicab, it'd be, where the hell is this guy? I'll go out in the rain, I'll look around, maybe he's already arrived, maybe he's parked around the corner. I'll go out in the rain looking like an idiot and see if I can find out. Minicab, oh God, he's not here, maybe he's already left, okay? With Uber, you could look at the screen and go, oh look, he's stuck at those traffic lights, I'll have another pint. There were other emotional benefits to Uber, I think. I think the fact that you didn't have to pay and fart about with a wallet, the fact that you just got out of the car and said thanks, and that the receipt was emailed to you, made it feel like a service and not like a transaction. So generally in human behavior, there's much more subtlety going on than economics and standard mathematical models really understand. So the trick for innovation is, as I said, look for things which are objectively similar but subjectively different. The right mixture of red and green is the same as yellow, okay? Depending on how something is presented, you can make something brilliant seem absolutely terrible, and you can make something pretty bad, as Ferrari did, seem brilliant. But that's my final bit of advice. Avoid conventional logic, because your competitors will all use that. Test counterintuitive things, because your competitors won't.